Hello, BookTube. As I mentioned yesterday, May is almost over. There's just a couple of days left in May. Doesn't feel it today. Today feels picked up and pulled out of the time stream because here in America it's a federal holiday. Uh, so there no businesses are open. Everybody's taking it easy. Everyone, in fact, is out of town. They're all celebrating at the beach or in the campsite or whatever, and we'll come back very very reluctantly later tonight. I would say there's no traffic, but the chances are overwhelmingly high that this video, like every other video that I make, will be periodically stopped by unbelievable amounts of traffic noise. Even so, despite the impression that yields, there is lots less traffic. Uh, it's a federal holiday that is the end of a weekend, so it doesn't feel like it's part of the normal path of time, and yet it definitely counts as a day on the calendar. It brings us one day closer to June. And the reading goes on, of course. But I have a bookcase on the other side of this room that is divided month by month for upcoming releases, for the print and paper copies of review copies that I have. And that forces me to think about books in a monthly way, in monthly increments. And now, at the end of May, when I am reorganizing the top shelf, which will be June books, I'm automatically thinking about the May books that I have reviewed, the May books that I've liked, and the May books that I haven't got to yet. With the kind of unrealizable but still persistent hope that I can get to them all before May is over. That never happens. There are always holdovers from the previous month, but I have a list here that I want to go through of some May books that I either need to read or reread. And believe it or not, the first one is a reread. I read it and I thought it was brilliant. And so much so thoughtful that I want to give it another go. Maybe this doesn't count for May, considering how many other books there are. Probably I will leave it off. I definitely want this to be a mental note to go back to this book before the end of the year. This is by Lane or Laney Nooney, and this is Apple II, the Apple II Age, How the Computer Became Personal. And there's an old, dot computer illustration of an old computer. And that's what this is all about. It's about the genesis of the personal computer. And as we've seen on this channel, and I've certainly seen it off this channel, there have been a lot of books on this subject, but this is amazing. Takes the subject to a whole nother level. I was so enjoying this. I so enjoyed reading this. But I'm not 100% sure that I also got it all, and I want to get it all because this is a subject that I lived through. This is history that I lived through, and it ended up changing the whole world. It changed my world. It's the complete contour of my world now, and I remember a lot of the steps that are involved here. I even remember a lot of the commercials and the magazine ads. I want to go back to this. So this is a May remainder, but it's not a May book that I haven't read. Most of the ones on here are May books that I haven't read, like this one. This is by Clara Benson. This is an Angela Marchand murder mystery. There are a series of, I believe, self-published murder mysteries, very well done. The one of the pressing gimmicks is a change in locale, a drastic change in locale. This is the body on Archangel Beach. These lovely covers that they all have. I have read a lot of books in this series. I'm not 100% sure that I've read them all. This is another example of something that was suggested to me by Amazon. I'm pretty sure that one of the earliest books in this series was suggested to me by Amazon. And I'm pretty sure that years ago when I first read that, I was able to access a package to get like the first 3 for free or at a drastically reduced price, the kinds of things that indie authors do in order to stir up interest in their books, especially in books in series. And I'm a big fan of murder mysteries anyway, but I think these are done with elegance and wit. This is a May release, and I haven't got to it yet. Well, then there's this one. This is by Cy Montgomery with help from Matt Patterson. I don't know for sure if this is meant to be a kid's book. I have yet to even peek inside it. It's called The Book of Turtles. I have a feeling from the shape and size of it that it probably is meant to be a kid's book, especially since Cy Montgomery is a big deal. If she had a new book for adults, I think it would be, I would know that. I would know for sure that that was true. But I find turtles endlessly fascinating. So even if this is a kid's book, I'm still going to want to know how it's done. If it's not a kid's book, it won't take long. So it will help me towards my impossible goal of getting all of these things done before June. This next one is a debut novel. I'm ordinarily bullish about debut novels on this channel. I absolutely love them. I'm not in this case. As I've mentioned before on this channel a few times, newcomers to the channel might find it a little odd that I would put books I know I'm going to dislike on my TBR, but nevertheless, we all have a remit for our reading. We all have a shape that we give to our reading. Even diehard mood readers do. And I do too. And by and large, the shape I give to my reading is American new releases in 15 or 16 genres that I like. So I don't have to like the book. I just have to like the genre. And in that circumstance, in that remit, the satisfaction for me will be in knowing what's out there. I will have read new releases. I will be bulldozing, as one reviewing colleague put it, whereas most of my other reviewing brethren have to pick and choose. They have to be more choosy. They don't have anywhere near as much time to devote to reading as I do. So I plow through these things, and that they do not have to be books that I think I'm going to like. This is a debut novel that I am sure I'm going to hate, because I could be wrong, but I'm sure I'm going to hate it, and I'm not going to hate it because I know that it's going to be poorly done. Who knows how it will be done? I think I'm going to hate it because I hate its author. This is the debut novel, Central Park West, the debut novel of James Comey, the former Obama-era administrator who handed the 2016 election to Donald Trump. He is responsible for the fact that Donald Trump was president for 4 years, because he announced that he was reopening an investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails virtually on the eve of the election. He knew perfectly well that would tank her chances. He knew perfectly well that if he didn't make that announcement, she would probably have won the 2016 election. And instead of a racist, sexist, fascist, lying moron who actually tried to physically overthrow the government and execute his vice president, we would just have had an endless 4 years of Clinton scandals, probably an endless 8 years of Clinton scandals. Because Hillary Clinton and her husband are two of the most scandal-prone politicians in American history. Neither one of them would have wanted to overthrow the government and make me a slave. So much as I hate to say it, they would have been the lesser of two evils. James Comey knew all of that. He knew what would happen when he did that. He was desperate for the limelight. He was desperate for cameras on him. He says otherwise. His acolytes say otherwise. He swears up and down that what he did in favor of Hillary Clinton. He didn't want it to look like he was playing politics by keeping silent on the subject. That is just a lie. You can go back and watch. Lordy, there are tapes. You can go back and watch the press conference where he announces this new thing. And suddenly the whole press room goes wild because they know he has just thrown the election to Donald Trump. You can go back and watch that press conference. Don't take my word for it, and definitely don't take his word for it. Just use your own instinct, your own ability to read people. Go back and see that press conference and say to yourself, is this a person who's just desperate for you to be paying attention to him? I think your instincts will tell you yes. You've seen enough 13-year-old children to know that when you see it. I don't have much hope that he will be any good at writing fiction. But it's not often that such a pivotal figure in American history writes a book. If I'm going to read Stacey Abrams' novels, I'm going to read Jim Comey's novel. But we'll move on. Move on to something else that won't exactly be a read. So again, this gives me a note of hope that maybe I can cram in a lot of these things before the 1st of June. This is the fantastic Gustav Dore. It's a big compendium of the artwork of the great 19th century artist Gustav Dore, who illustrated 18 million books, did all sorts of spot illustrations and work of all kinds. It's amazing. He's one of my favorite book artists. He's once upon a time was absolutely synonymous. You couldn't look at a copy of the Bible or Paradise Lost or Dante's Divine Comedy without seeing it full of Gustav Dore illustrations. I love him. I think his work is fantastic. And this is, I guess, a big compendium. I have a couple of those. But I'm always interested to see what somebody else does with it. Like, for instance, is maybe the theme of this foreshadowed in the word fantastic? Maybe this is not going to be like his Scenes of London Poor or anything like that. Maybe this is just going to be his fantasy creatures. I'll take it either way. And I don't think it will require much in the way of reading. So it might get me towards my goal. Then we have an author I really like. I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that I haven't got to this book yet. But then again, a lot of the books on this list I'm disappointed that I haven't got to yet. The author is Elliot Ackerman, who I think is not only really good, but really important, and who goes back and forth between fiction and nonfiction with ease. This is a novel. This is Halcyon, which I think is alternate history, science fiction-y type thing. But I don't know. I don't know for sure. I don't know much about this thing, and I haven't even dipped into it. But Elliot Ackerman is one of those authors, young though he is, he's one of those authors on an admittedly long list that I don't really feel I can legitimately miss if they do something new. I have a list of authors like that. It's rather long. If they do something new, I don't feel like I can just skip it. I certainly don't feel like I can say, when it comes to someone like Elliot Ackerman, I don't feel like I can say, well, you know, if you've read Run, you've read them all. So if he comes out with a new book, I don't really need to do it. Definitely not him. And while we're on the subject of those kinds of authors, there's the next author on the list here. This is also a novel. I haven't got to it yet. But it's by a figure that I feel is too important for me to skip. Even if his latest project doesn't look that interesting to me. This is The Humble Lover by Edmund White, who had a large hand in inventing the subgenre of gay fiction in the 20th century. Has a number of really good books, a few stinkers, but a number of really good books. He's a heck of a nice guy. I don't feel like I can miss a book of his, whether or not I get the impression, all of my instincts tell me this is a left-handed exercise, that the author didn't pay any attention to it, so why should I? Those instincts could be wrong. They've been wrong before. Many times they've been wrong this year. So whatever those instincts are, I don't want to miss this. I don't imagine it'll take much time to read, but I don't want to miss it for May. This next one is a murder mystery. It's kind of Scandi noir. It's kind of, hangdog, a-hole, alcoholic, stupid main protagonist that you're somehow still supposed to love and also respect for professionalism, even though they're the dumbest person in the book. It's a Harry Hole novel. This is by Joe Nesbo. This is Killing Moon. I haven't got to this yet. I think I've read every book in this series. I'm not 100% sure, but if I have, I've come close. It never does. As you can tell from my voice, it doesn't do anything for me. These don't do anything for me. This is just a major author with a huge readership, and I know that. So it doesn't feel right not to read this and maybe be surprised by it. Who knows? I haven't ever been surprised by this author. Then, again, some of the books on this list, some of the remainders, the reason that they've waited until the very tail end of May is maybe because I haven't been enthusiastic to get to them. Some of the books on this list are books I know I will hate because I hate their authors, or because I hate their subject matters, or I hate their approach. The shotgun conservationist, for God's sake. Some of the books on this list are like that, and I'm going to do them anyway because that is the thing that gives me pleasure. Even when it's pain. How's that for a Catholic sentiment? Even when it's painful, it still gives me pleasure to cover the waterfront, to cover new releases in the American book market. At the end of the year, the joy I get from being able to look back and say, well, I got creamed, but I did a better job than anyone else. I came closer to doing this weird goal than anyone else. So although I didn't really come close, I came closer than anybody else, and I don't feel like I'm going into the new year of reading with a gigantic weight on me of all the books I didn't get to in the previous year. I hate that feeling. And I won't have it. Most years I don't have it. This is a book I'm sure I'm going to hate on a number of different levels, not least because of its author. The author is Josh Hawley, an insurrectionist and a traitor who does not belong in the U.S. government. He belongs in a U.S. jail or in front of a U.S. firing squad. But nevertheless, he's a free man. He's an influential man. He's the author of a book called Manhood, The Masculine Virtues America Needs. I have started on this book. I put it down because the evening that I started it, I thought, this is just going to... It was, by random chance, it was in the last spot in my reading rotation, and I thought, if you read this last, it's going to ruin a whole day of your life. This worm is not worth a whole day of your life. So just don't do... I already started it, and I knew that, and I put it away. I said, get to it before the end of the month. And I picked up something else instead. But my time is almost up, so I have to read this. This is, as you can tell, a treatise on what it is to be a man by Josh Hawley. who kisses his wife in public with his lips tightly pursed closed. I'm not going to fall into the trap here of the presuppositions of this book. The main one of which is that there's an idea of manhood that is really valuable to adopt, even if you don't feel it. That if you're going about your life and you're a 15-year-old boy and you don't feel like doing any of the things that are listed in this manifesto or Andrew Tate's manifesto or anybody's manifesto, that there's something wrong with you. That is the presupposition of this book, is that if you are a young man, this is only written for men. This is a book written in a fantasy world in which women are not taught to read. The presupposition of this book, one of many of them, is that if you aren't these things, you should be these things. You should become these things. Train yourself to be these things when you're fine the way you are. But I don't want to fall into those kinds of presuppositions. I especially don't want to go too far down the lane of personal experience. In my life, I have befriended young men between the ages of 18 and 25 on a regular basis. For decades, I have done this. They have grown up to be family men, husbands, fathers, even grandfathers, respected men in their professions, people that it was my honor to test and tease and befriend when they were very young. And Josh Hawley would certainly have been one of those men. If I mean, billions and billions of them don't ever become that because our paths don't ever cross. But if our paths had crossed, all my instincts say I would have thought, yeah, we can definitely do that. We can definitely have that kind of relationship, that kind of friendship. And that makes it extra bitter that he's become a fascist lapdog. I've never met him, and I never will meet him. I don't want to meet him, but I have to say, in America's current cast of villains, him and Madison Cawthorn are the ones that dig the worst at me. Because somewhere along the line, someone like me maybe had a chance to fix them or save them from becoming fascist lapdogs and didn't do it. I tell myself, I scold that imaginary person that why didn't you get him away from that path when you knew what would happen? There's that. There's also a lifetime of experience in reading people, in reading their body language, in listening to them talk, in listening to what concerns them. I think an aspect of that lifetime of experience could probably be boiled down to the term known as gaydar. I have lots of questions about why Josh Hawley would write a book about manhood. Let's just put it that way. But one thing was clear, even from the part of this book that I did read, and that is that this is based more than anything else on garden variety misogyny. A large part of, I will finish reading it and see. Maybe I'm selling it short. Maybe it's brilliant. Maybe it's Schopenhauer. But I think a large part of what it means to be a man in this book is that you're thanking God every day that you're not a woman. And that you should be attacking women. Let's not have them in the workplace. They should be home. Fixing my meals because I don't know how to do that. Cleaning my clothes because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to clean up after myself. I'm a small toddler. What I really need is a mother or a head servant. That's pretty clear pretty early on in this book, is that it's not just manhood. It's manhood instead of womanhood. But I'll still read the whole thing. I'll still read the whole thing just to see if maybe, possibly... now, this next one, I don't hate the author. And I don't hate the subject, God knows. I read one of these books every single day. Almost every single day. If it's not a business motivation memoir about, the how to put the I in team, then it's one of these things. This is a Christian memoir. A Christian memoir slash vague as milk theology. This is by Doug Wilson. Some of you might remember for having done a couple of YouTube conversations with the late Christopher Hitchens. And this is his new book, Mere Christendom, which obviously nods in its title to Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. But unlike Lewis, Wilson here is calling for Christian theocracy. He won't say it that way. And he would probably, oh my, I can't believe you would, how could you, I'm feeling faint, if you brought it up. But if that isn't what this book is, if this book isn't actually calling for Christian theocracy in place of representative democratic government, then I'll be amazed. I've read 2 or 3 books by Doug Wilson, and I think he's an interesting writer on Christian themes. He's intensely predictable, as tends to be true when Christians map their faith onto their politics. They tend to become intensely predictable. But it's a new release in Christian studies, in religious studies. That is a field that I really am interested in, although a number of you pointed out that although that is a field that I am very much interested in, it does not appear as a category in my year-end list. My Steve Reads a raucous year-end list of the best and worst books of the year. That is true, and maybe I need to rectify that. Then we have a book that I've already shown you, and it's been sitting there, and I just haven't got to it. And in this case, it's not an aversion to the author. I don't mind the author. It's not an aversion to the subject. I don't mind the subject. I just haven't got to it. I don't actually have a good excuse. There's always been something that cropped up instead. This is Jeff Shar's novel, The Old Lion, a novel about Theodore Roosevelt, who, as I mentioned the last time I talked about this with you, is hard to capture in fiction. I have almost never seen it done well. A couple of moments in The Alienist by Caleb Carr, which isn't really even centering on Roosevelt, and it certainly isn't talking about President Roosevelt, but almost never otherwise, unless you count Edmund Morris's trilogy as quasi-fictional. Certainly it's the closest that you would love, that trilogy. If you think you don't like biographies, and especially 3-volume biographies, you're dead wrong. You just haven't read the right biographies. If you read Edmund Morris's The Rise of Theodore Roosevelt, you will love it, whether you read biographies or not. It's all a question of how energetically you tell the story. I've often said that historians think they don't have to worry about that, and they do. You might still get a contract, but you'll be a boring historian, and Edmund Morris is not. But Jeff Shar is not a boring novelist. It bothers me when he is conflated with his father when it comes to Civil War fiction, but he's not a boring novelist. He's very entertaining to read. I'm sure that this will... I have a good excuse why I haven't got to this thing yet. I will, though. Then this next one, I am not going to buy this. I can't request it. I don't actually have a publicity contact to use. But I was going to buy it, and I'm not. I'm going to exercise self-control and not buy it. It's $100-something, and it's this. It's the 4th Mighty Thor Omnibus from Marvel Comics. There with a great Gil Kane cover with Thor and Hercules fighting the hordes of the god of war, Pluto, who for some reason has a mohawk. I know the exact issues that this reprints, and I have the issues from when I was buying them on the newsstand. And I also have the Marvel Masterworks volumes, the big hardcover volumes, and I also have the digital volumes. So when I saw this omnibus being offered, I thought, well, do I want it or do I not? And then I thought, you have these multiple times over. It would be crazy for you to spend that much money on a big hardcover that will be uncomfortable to read, less comfortable to read than any of those other formats. So don't do it. Just reread the issues. Now, I haven't got the omnibus. I am controlling myself. But I also haven't reread the issues. And I did plan on doing that in May. Again, that won't take much time. I can practically recite these issues from memory. But I haven't done even that. So those issues of Thor, at least, I need to get to before May is over. Then we have a book by Paul Strathern. I don't know if we've seen this already. This is The Other Renaissance. A book of his that, again, I have no idea why I haven't got to this. This is about the Renaissance that didn't happen in Italy. The Renaissance that happened in England, for instance, and in Europe, in Northern Europe. And it's full of figures, that figures like Shakespeare, whose names but you don't often associate them with any kind of Renaissance. And this book is a welcome remedy. There have been others like it, but I know the broad outlines of this story really well, and I am assuming that Paul Strathern will stay away from the aspects of the other Renaissance that he's talking about that were specifically theological. I'm assuming he'll stay away from those and concentrate on literature, poetry, drama, the arts, and that's okay with me. That's fine by me. This is intensely of interest to me, but I haven't got to it yet. Then there's this next thing. This is a trifle. It won't take more than an hour to read. and it's an author I like, so I will get to it, but it's not going to be an effort to get this done by May. This is Swamp Story by Dave Barry, who was, and maybe still is, a newspaper humorist columnist, and doesn't, to me, have any demonstrated talent to do otherwise. His novels don't seem to me to be, they are Carl Hiaasen light, and Carl Hiaasen is already light, so I don't know what you would call them. They're ditties. They're little ditties of novels, mostly a collection of good one-liners. There's usually one good liner in each chapter, but the chapter is built around those, and the whole thing hangs on them, like hanging a painting on cheap plaster on a wall. You're just wondering if the slightest weight will pull it loose completely. This won't have anything to it at all. It won't have anything to it at all, unless I'm wrong. It's entirely possible that 2 years ago, Dave Barry sat down at his writing desk and thought, well, I'm going to write a novel, but I'm not going to make it a trifle. I recognize what critics have said about my fiction. I'm going to change that. I'm going to dig deep. It could be that he did that for this novel. That has happened. I have seen that happen. Those kinds of surprises are a large part of why I have the reading remit that I do. I'm not holding out hope here any more than I would for any of the other proven numbers. Dave Barry knows that he has a proven audience with what he's doing. Most authors, when you present them with a bare minimum, never rise above it. So I don't have much hope, but even if it's a trifle, it won't take long. Then we have, this is nonfiction. I believe one of the first nonfiction things by this author. This is a YA novelist, Ruta Sepetys, who did The Salt and the Sea. I believe her most famous book, I assume it's her, is The Salt and the Sea. This is a new book, You, the Story. It's a guide to writing, specifically through the lens of autobiography. I think the subtitle says memory. Yeah, a writer's guide to the craft through memory. Through autobiography, through your own life stories. I'm wondering what this will be. I'm always up for reading a book on the craft of writing. I don't get much out of most of them. Most of them, I think, are designed to stop you from writing. They're designed to help you procrastinate. Because the definition of a writer is a person who most wants to write more than anyone else, and writes less than anyone else. And because they study the means of procrastination. And writing manuals are a big way that they do that. They're not as popular as writing seminars or writing online classes or whatnot. Those are all only things to stop you from writing. They're only instruments of procrastination. Ultimately, this will be too, no matter what it says at all. The only advice you need for writing is to write. If you want to be a writer, if you want to get good at it, if you want to call yourself a writer, write for an hour a day. Write 5,000 words a day. And don't ever take any days off. Write 5,000 words a day, and at the end of the year, you will know everything there is to know about writing that any of these writing manuals could teach you. You'll have learned it through experience. You won't need to put it on a whiteboard. You won't need to write it up in an online spreadsheet. You'll have learned it through experience. It will be yours if you do that. If you don't do that, no amount of these books will ever make your writing any better. That's the only thing that will make your writing better, is to do 5,000 words a day from now until the day you die. But I'm still be interested to see. I know that a lot of writers are going to have pre-ordered this. A lot of writers are going to be living with this thing for days because it's the perfect excuse not to be writing. I'm reading about writing. I'm going to make my writing better. So that'll make it curious to me just on its own. But unlike the rest of you who are using it that way, I do budget time for writing every day, and you don't, and you should. But anyway, we'll wrap up this list. This list has gone long, as always. This is my May remainders. Oh my God, I don't know how many of these I'll get to. Some of them I can fly through. Others are going to require more time than that, so I will have leftovers from May. This next one is a reread. I would like to get it done in May, not because I care about, it's an older book, so I don't care when I get it read. I'd like to get it done in May because there are 1,000 books like it lined up directly behind it. And the sooner I get 100 of them done, is the sooner I can move on to the second 100. The sooner I get 500 done, is the sooner I can move on to 501. This is by Martin Rady, who just had a book called The Middle Kingdoms, which is a terrific read. If you see The Middle Kingdoms at your library and you're interested in European history, get it out of the library. You'll keep reading. It's a big, chunky book, I think, for basic books, but it's very, very readable. This is a very, very readable author. I have read this book, but I'm going to be rereading it. This is The Habsburgs, The Rise and Fall of a World Power. It's very good. Don't be misled by my rolling eyes. It's just I'm not particularly looking forward to spending the whole of the summer up to my eyeballs in the Habsburgs, but I will nevertheless do it. And this is one of the first ones that I'm starting with. So I will be rereading this, and I'm hoping that I can get it done in May. But we're ending the same way that we started. We started with The Apple II, which is a reread because I know that I like the book. So it's a luxury when it comes to clearing out these things for the end of May. I can postpone it. I can reread it in October. And the Habsburgs, Martin Rady's book, The Habsburgs, is also a luxury. We'll end the same way that we began because I can put this off. It's not a May release. It's years old. I would like to get a jump on it. So if I leave those two off, then I've only got the rest of the list to deal with. And some of that list is easy. One might be a kid's book. A couple of them are flyweight novels. I don't expect Jim Comey to be Turgenev, so I'm imagining the Central Park Five will not be hard to cut through. The Dave Barry will not be hard to get through. The Joe Nesbo will not be hard to get to. I will see the conclusion coming a mile away. I'll still read it, but I am hoping. It isn't possible. I've only got a couple of days left, and there are a lot of other things to read. But I'm hoping that I can get May relatively squared away before we start June. June is a fairly healthy month for book publishing. Lots and lots of stuff to read in June. Plus the random accidental surprises that I find out along the way. So, nevertheless, I would love, since I'm burdening you with my troubles, I'd love to know, this is the kind of nosy stuff that I want to ask you anyway. If you were over here for Wine and Calzones, when you are reaching the end of a month, we're at the end of May. Do you look at your books that way? I've asked you this before. Do you look and think, okay, well, what did I want to get done in May? And now that I'm looking at the calendar and seeing that there's barely any time left in May, am I going to work extra hard to get it done? Or am I going to just write it off and say there isn't any time left? I barely have any time to read during the day, so I can't. This was unrealistic. I can't do it. And then what? If that happens, do you roll that over into June? Or do you give yourself the admittedly wonderful feeling of just cleaning the slate and saying, all right, June is brand new. And I'll get to those other books someday. I'm not going to let them prey on my mind. I'd love to hear it. You're in the same position that I am. You're 2 or 3 days away from the end of the month. What does that do to your reading? If anything. I imagine those of us where it does something to our reading are probably looking with a great deal of envy on those of you who couldn't care less and don't notice this at all. At this time of year, at this time of the month, I do somewhat envy that, but nevertheless, this is the path I've chosen. So let me hear all about it. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up and get to work on these books. But I'll be back. Thank you, Book 2.